we are absolutely thrilled to have Shannon Butt of the ALC Changemakers, who lives, who recently moved into our area, in fact, in Perth, which is absolutely fantastic, and very much looking forward to some of the things that we might be able to do together going forward. And then on top of it, we are also going to have our sharing time following this recording. So just as a means of a little bit of a review, just to save me some editing afterwards, we do ask that questions be held by both our virtual audience as well as our studio audience until after Shannon's presentation is complete. We will stop the recording at that point and then take questions and have our sharing time following that. And so with that, we also want to make sure that we are acknowledging that we are currently on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, of which we work, play, and pray. And at this point, I would ask for Shannon to come on up and take it from here.
Good morning, everybody. Do this. Let me get this. All right. Great to see all of your faces. I'm looking forward to being here with you this morning. So yes, my name is Shannon. I am a part of the Adult Leadership Collaborative of FASD Changemakers. I'm also a yoga teacher, I'm an artist, and I'm an entrepreneur. Though more often I would describe myself as like a professional napper and a dog mom and probably a little bit of a misfit. 2 years ago at the age of 33, I was diagnosed with FASD after many misdiagnoses, including bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder, which are common misdiagnoses when the real underlying issue is FASD. This diagnosis has profoundly changed my life. It's helped me to be a part of something that is much bigger than myself. And most importantly, I've realized that this incredibly challenging aspect of my life isn't anyone's fault. It took me a long time to reach this perspective. At first, I was pretty angry and blameful, but over time, I've come to understand that alcohol and pregnancy are a much broader social issue and not so much just a personal one. Throughout my life, I have faced significant challenges, including mental health conditions, substance use disorder, various addictions, along with difficulties in concentration, vocational pursuits, and social and emotional functioning. Conventional mental health interventions and support systems have not effectively improved my situation. I have attempted suicide multiple times, and I've been hospitalized for suicidal ideation. In addition, I manage several other health issues such as degenerative disc disease, chronic ear infections, persistent pain, migraines, bulimia, and complex PTSD. I also experience heightened sensory sensitivities, particularly to bright lights and loud noises, and I often require additional preparations for situations that many people find routine or simple. The pervasive nature of FASD truly highlights it as a whole body disorder. So today I would like to talk to you about resilience. Due to the way that my brain functions with FASD, I've had numerous opportunities to build this skill. A great deal of hard work takes place behind the scenes to allow me to stand here before you today. With the right support, resilience becomes a skill that many individuals like myself are fortunate to develop in order to thrive. It's something that both weighs on me and fills me with immense pride at the same time. So while resilience has helped me get to where I am today, it can also feel like a burden. The best things in life often carry this duality, this bittersweet and multifaceted duality. So a writer named Jean Chatsky said this quote, move that right there, about emotional resilience, and that is, emotional resilience is not a single skill. It's a variety of skills and coping mechanisms It's the ability to bounce back from a stressful encounter and not let it affect our internal motivation. It's not a bend but don't break situation. Rather, resilience is about accepting brokenness and continuing to grow while putting the pieces back together. So, because resilience isn't one single skill, it looks different for everybody, especially for folks with FASD. So today I'd like to share a bit about what resilience has looked like for me over the years. We'll dive into talking about mindfulness, sobriety, and we'll touch on external supports like diagnosis, relationships, and privilege. So to begin, I'd actually like to guide you through a brief mindfulness meditation. Don't worry, there's no wrong way to participate. And so you might be wondering exactly what is mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness involves bringing non-judgmental awareness to the present moment. So the emphasis is to observe ourselves and not critique ourselves. So like I said, no wrong way to participate, no prior experience is necessary. Approach this exercise with an open heart and an open mind, allowing yourself to be fully present and engaged in each second. So let's start by becoming aware of the breath. What does that even mean? It simply involves being conscious of your breath while you follow an inhale in and an exhale out. You're not trying to change the rhythm of your breath or judge how it feels. You're trying to observe how it flows naturally within your body. So you might silently say to yourself on the inhale, I am breathing in. And on the exhale, I am breathing out. This simple, I am breathing in, I am breathing out, following an inhale and an exhale, this is presence. This is awareness. This is grounding into the moment. You might have heard that before. So take a few breaths like this. I'm breathing in and I am breathing out. So as you start to become more aware of your body in this space, let's gently deepen the breath. So as you inhale, allow the breath to become a little bit fuller. And as you exhale, allow the breath to become a little bit longer. On your inhale, you might imagine the scent of something delicious. So I always like to think of cinnamon buns. And I'm really trying to smell those cinnamon buns that are being cooked next door. And then on your exhale, imagine that you're blowing out the candles on your birthday cake. So it'll look and sound a little bit like this. Can everybody do that with me? One more. Good. So this type of breath can calm the nervous system, and it helps prepare your mind to be fully present and receptive for the remainder of the presentation. So next, we're going to engage our senses in something that I like, well, I don't like to call it this. It's named well before me, a 5-4-3-2-1 exercise. So I personally use this to help regulate my own nervous system when I'm feeling overwhelmed. So we'll start with sight. So take a look around the room and identify 5 things that you can see. It could be the chair, picture on the wall, a round table, a hanger, shoes, someone's shirt. So don't worry about remembering what you're looking at. That's not very FASD friendly. So this exercise is meant to be gentle and stress-free. So looking at these objects that you're considering, what colors stand out to you? What textures stand out to you as you're looking around? So looking for 5 things. And once you've identified these 5 things, I invite you to either close your eyes if it feels safe, or perhaps just soften your gaze looking onto the floor or the ceiling. Relax your facial muscles and let your shoulders drop. And next we'll move to the sense of touch. Find 4 things that you can feel. This could be the sensation of air on your skin, the fit of your shoes on your feet, the texture of the chair that you're sitting in. Take a moment to connect with these tactile experiences. And then we'll focus on sound. So identify 3 things that you can hear. So one of them could be the sound of my voice. Perhaps you hear the slight rattling of little Emma's binky. Maybe you can hear the light hum of the laptop. Tuning into sounds around you. Okay, and shift your identity to your sense of smell. Maybe you can smell your shampoo or your deodorant on your person. Perhaps you can smell coffee close to you or the scent of sweets. Lastly, run your tongue across your teeth and notice your sense of taste. Maybe your breakfast or the taste of lingering mouthwash. So these are all 5 of your senses, and you're grounding into all of them. You're being aware of all of them. So you can start to bring your attention back into your breath and bring your awareness back into the room here. Maybe you notice that your breathing has become calmer, longer, softer. Maybe not, and that's okay too. So there is a couple of reasons why I like to open with a meditation. One, it puts us all on a level playing field. We have a different rush of our own unique blend of kids, pets, family wanting last minute things as we walk out the door. Maybe there was traffic on the way here. Whatever it is that has or hasn't happened in your morning, we're all starting from the same place now. Nobody is being left behind. Second, mindfulness exercises like meditation are proven to help energy levels, focus, and even mood. I personally use a meditation app called Insight Timer. Feel free to ask me about it later. It's a free app that has over 100,000 on-demand meditations in many different styles at many different lengths. I use it to calm myself down, prepare for events like today, and I listen to it every night when I go to sleep. So another thing that has helped me over the years in the Department of Mindfulness is acceptance and commitment therapy, or acceptance and commitment training, as the T is interchangeable. So from here on out, I will refer to acceptance and commitment therapy by its acronym, which is ACT. So I was lucky enough to work with a certified ACT therapist. Her name is Angela Geddes from the very beginning of my suspected diagnosis a few years ago. So I got a taste for this therapy right from the start. At the core of acceptance and commitment therapy is the practice of being open, aware, and engaged. So this involves being open to experiencing difficulties, aware of how those difficulties are impacting us, and actively engaged in choosing the outcomes that we desire. This is what it means to be psychologically flexible. Research has shown that ACT is effective for a wide range of individuals, from those who are experiencing test-taking anxiety to those managing severe mental health disorders. It promotes autonomy and it reduces burnout. ACT has been instrumental in helping me identify my personal values and align my life with them. Actually, Dr. Brene offers a values exercise, and you can find it by Googling Dr. Brene Brown values exercise online. It's really hard to see. I wanted to get a larger list, but this is her list of values. So there's like nearly 100 here. And let me just find my spot. Oh, okay. So there's around 50. And the goal is to narrow, in this exercise, the goal is to narrow your values down to just 2 values rather, which serve as a foundation for your decision making. So it's a challenging process, but it's a rewarding process. So maybe you can see, maybe it's pretty small. I'm going to read out some of the values on the screen. So there's accountability, achievement, adaptability, belonging, beauty, community, compassion, dignity, diversity, environment, efficiency, equality. So just as I read a couple more of them out, notice if any of these resonate with you as your own personal values. There's humor, growth, grace, intuition, job security, leadership, learning, optimism, parenting, patience, that's one of mine, personal fulfillment, power, recognition, self-discipline, self-expression, self-respect, trust, truth, usefulness, vulnerability, wholeheartedness, and wisdom. So my values are patience and curiosity. And knowing these two values were at the core of my being helped to guide my ACT sessions as I had a more clear understanding of what truly mattered to me. So the concept of acceptance in ACT doesn't mean that you have to accept every difficulty in life, but rather be open to the experiences and learn how you respond to them. It's about shifting your relationship with challenging experiences, getting curious about them, and then changing the language that you use to express your thoughts. Often our thoughts are shaped by cultural conditioning and may not align with who or how we want to be. ACT encourages us to question these unchecked narratives that run through our heads. The commitment piece of ACT involves actively choosing what your next step is. What action can you take that aligns with your values? What action can you take that aligns with who you feel you are? Impulsivity can sometimes override our ability to choose, especially with FASD. And so that's why ACT also teaches the importance of self-compassion. But over time, through acceptance and commitment therapy, you learn to struggle a little bit less with things that once caused you significant pain. And instead focus on living a life consistent with your values. So I'll tell you a little story about that. So my family, I value them deeply. I love them very much. And I know that they love and support me, and I fully reciprocate that love and support. Alongside of this, one of my personal goals is to become less reactive, more respond rather than react to things that are happening in my family unit, to things everywhere, but especially within my family unit. So in the past, I often lashed out when I felt overwhelmed by sensory input or emotions, which would lead me to needing space and then having to apologize after. It always made me feel like I was the center of attention, but never in a good way. Unfortunately, my loved ones bore the impact of these reactions, and it required significant time and energy to recover from these episodes. ACT has been instrumental in helping me manage these situations and make meaningful process. So one day I'm at my parents' house and I'm chopping vegetables in the kitchen, and I'm like snacking and eating them while I also prepare for dinner. It's like very normal household thing to be doing. My stepmom is at the table writing a grocery list. My dad is in the basement renovating this apartment that they were building for me, which is incredibly generous of them. And I honestly don't know if I would be where I am today without this loving apartment. That's a side note. So dad's downstairs working on the renovation. There's no soundproofing yet. So I hear his phone ring and I hear him answer and he goes, "Hello, mother." And I know it's my nan and she's calling from Newfoundland to video chat as she often does. So I hear my dad like coming up the stairs and talking, and I know that he's, I'm about to see my grandmother on his phone. So he goes, "Here now, I'll show you the girls." And he points the camera at me and he's like, "There's Shannon snacking while I build her a house. And there's Karen making a grocery list and da 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 da." Sounds pretty normal, right? Alarm bells were going off in my head because my dad said, "Shannon is snacking while I build her a house." And in my body, he might as well have just said, "Shannon is fat and lazy. And while I am downstairs building her a house, she is up here eating." It actually, I can feel it in my body, like just telling you this story. That is not what my dad said. And that is not what my dad meant. He was in no way trying to be malicious to me. And this is a huge learning process that I am going through right now. So what I wanted to do was throw all of the shit off the counter and scream at him and tell him that he was wrong and that I wasn't lazy and that I wasn't fat, and I would have gone into my bedroom and slammed the door and I wouldn't have been making dinner anymore and everybody would have had to clean up after me. That's not how I want to live my life anymore. Like, I'm so sick of these huge reactions, and I know that with this work, I can do better. So I reminded myself that my dad's comment had no malicious intention. This is, of course, this takes time and effort to be able to develop this skill. My face felt flushed. I felt warmth spreading through my body. I held back my tears, and then I reminded myself that I had the power to choose my reaction in this moment, and I could choose not to react. So I sat down, I joined the video call with my grandmother, I finished making dinner, I cleaned up the kitchen, and then I went to my bedroom and I cried. I cried on my own time. I didn't interrupt anything else in the family. So impulsivity, of course, sometimes gets the better of me, and I don't always get to choose my reactions. So then, of course, I practice a great deal of self-compassion. But sometimes the work pays off. And sometimes you get to have these awesome moments where you don't react, and then you have a beautiful family dinner and a beautiful conversation with your grandmother. And those are the moments where you're like, oh, what a win. What a win. So how did I develop that? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. How I had to develop this inner voice that needed to be curious in my head about what is good for me and what I wanted. So I let this inner voice get curious, and I silenced the critical voice in my head that was criticizing me. So this brings me to my third point on mindfulness and how it relates to FASD, and that is inner dialogue. So the work that I've done on improving my inner dialogue, or my self-talk, has been pivotal. I'm having trouble with my words this morning in my journey. Learning to speak for myself with kindness has been transformative. It involves shifting statements like, I'm weak, this shouldn't be a big deal, to, I'm going through a lot right now, how is my body carrying it? Or changing, what is wrong with me, to, is there something that I need right now? Or even replacing, I should be over this already, with, what is it that my feelings are trying to tell me? So it's not just about changing the words, it's about recognizing the power behind our thoughts and understanding what's driving them. So for instance, without this inner work, I simply wouldn't be here today presenting to you. I would have second-guessed myself, doubted my self-worth, and likely backed out altogether. Beneath those self-doubts is fear. Fear of being vulnerable, fear of judgment, fear of sharing my story. By getting curious about these fears, I was able to take control and make space for my true voice. This curiosity eventually led me to ask, whose voice is this telling me that I'm not good enough to be here? Doesn't feel like mine. I once heard that the critical voice in our heads is not our own, but it's a mix of voices shaped by our experiences. So it's how our parents spoke to themselves, it's how they spoke to us, and then some other influential figures from your past. Do you all know what I mean when I say the voice inside your head? It's not just me over here. Okay. So it's that voice that says, I should have remembered to pick up that prescription, or I embarrassed myself in that meeting, or I shouldn't have done that. So they're seemingly harmless thoughts that can cause us immense emotional turmoil. Through mindfulness, I realized that not only was this voice not mine, but there were actually multiple voices masquerading as my own. Without curiosity, I would have continued believing that these voices were me. But with curiosity, I discovered my true, authentic voice, and I also uncovered who these other voices belonged to. In my case, they were my mom, my dad, my sister, and these two high school bullies that gave a lasting impression. But it wasn't just their voices, it was a distorted version of them captured in their worst moments. And that realization didn't feel fair. I knew I had some forgiveness work to do. Not just forgiving those individuals for having difficult moments, because we're all human and we all have difficult moments, but also forgiving myself for allowing their voices to shape my inner dialogue for so long. In the end, by cultivating compassion and curiosity, I was able to let go of these voices and embrace my own. It has changed the way that I talk to myself, which ultimately changes how I talk to others as well. It's a powerful practice that has allowed me to show up in life, and right now it has allowed me to show up in front of all of you. Sobriety. One of the key pillars in my personal journey, am I on the right? No. One of the key pillars of my personal journey towards resilience is sobriety. Sobriety has been instrumental in revealing my true self, unfiltered by the societal conditioning that normalizes alcohol as an acceptable crutch for any occasion. According to CAN FASD, nearly half of individuals with FASD use substances, a startling statistic compared to only 21% of the general population. I too was masking my struggles with alcohol, having been exposed from a young age to the idea that alcohol was an appropriate coping mechanism. Whether it was to drown out grief, enhance social gatherings, or simply escape, I followed the path that many before me had already taken. I began experimenting with alcohol around the age of 12, and this pattern continued until just 3 years ago. For a significant part of my life, I identified as party girl, someone who knew how to have a so-called good time. But in truth, these moments were far from enjoyable. In an attempt to numb my pain and navigate a life that felt increasingly broken, I turned to harder drugs. This eventually led to a destructive cocaine addiction, and I resorted to sex work as a way to quickly earn the money that I needed to sustain my habit. The consequences of my substance abuse were profound, and the toll that it took on my life was absolutely immeasurable. Alcohol and drugs not only shattered my sense of self, but also wreaked havoc on my relationships, romantic, platonic, and familial. I lost jobs, I lost friends, and most painfully, I lost a significant amount of self-confidence. It has taken me years to rebuild the pieces of my life that the damage of addiction caused. While I could recount countless heartbreaking stories about the havoc alcohol and drugs wreaked on my life, I believe it's more important to focus on what helped me to build. That is sobriety. It has given me the real clarity to heal and the strength to regain control over my life. Rather than dwell on past mistakes, I choose to use my experiences to shed light on the transformative power of resiliency and recovery. So let's talk about yoga. I definitely don't mean the kind that is about handstands or complex balancing poses. Couldn't do a handstand to save my life. I'm referring to a slow, intentional, gentle movement for any body, paired with mindful breathing, combined with a deeper understanding of the roots of an ancient practice. So in my early 20s, I was introduced to a style of yoga called restorative yoga, where you spend the entire class lying down on the mat, surrounded by blankets, pillows, eye masks, and sometimes even sandbags to provide weight and support. You only move a handful of times, transitioning into different restorative postures that allow for deep relaxation. This practice was revolutionary for me. It was the first time in my life that I had slowed down. Up until then, I felt like I was constantly playing catch up, like I was out in the ocean drowning while everybody else was treading water just fine. The stillness and quiet of those classes allowed me to confront emotions that I hadn't even realized I was burying. It was in those first few sessions that I began to process trauma. Years of unacknowledged pain came to the surface. I often found myself silently sobbing into the pillow for the entire 90 minutes of the class, overwhelmed by the emotions that I had never allowed myself to feel before. So at first, yoga was a release from anxiety. I felt calmer, less anxious, and more at peace within the walls of a yoga studio. It became a sanctuary for me, a place where I could pause the chaos of life and simply be. And for the first time, I felt unjudged and fully accepted. As my practice deepened, yoga evolved from just physical movement and breath work into something much more profound. I began to explore the philosophical side of yoga, particularly what they call the 8 limbs of yoga. So these provide guidelines for a meaningful and purposeful life. These principles address ethical conduct, self-discipline, mental and physical health, and spirituality. Few things you don't learn in school, okay? The discovery of the 8 limbs of yoga felt like I had found a roadmap for how to navigate life in a more grounded and intentional way. Suddenly, I had this set of principles that guided not just my time on the mat, but how I conducted myself in the world. As someone who wasn't raised in a religious household, I had never strongly identified with any particular spiritual tradition, but yoga offered something different. It wasn't about pushing a belief system on me. It was about encouraging me to move my body with intention, breathe more consciously, connect with others, cultivate kindness, and prioritize my overall health, both physically and mentally. I had never resonated with the way that I resonated with the 8 limbs of yoga. By my late 20s, I felt so deeply connected to the practice that I decided to become a yoga teacher. I enrolled in a teacher training program, which marked a significant turning point in my life. Up until that point, I had never considered myself someone who enjoyed education, but this experience showed me otherwise. I realized that I actually thrive in environments where I'm truly invested in the subject matter. I just found a passion for continuing education that I never knew I had. This training was also the first time that this training was also the first time I was introduced to the concept of sobriety. This program required 30 days of no caffeine, no alcohol, and no meat. So for the first time, I experienced what it felt like to live without substances clouding my mind and body, and I had really never felt better. This period made me wonder for the first time in my life what it might be like to live a completely sober life. Yet, despite the positive effects I was seeing in my physical and mental well-being, I continued to drink and use heavily on weekends, often to the point of blacking out. I was caught in a cycle of self-sabotage, developing healthy habits during the week, only to undo them with alcohol on the weekends. This, I've come to realize, is what progress looks like. Growth is not linear, and building resilience takes time and patience. There are setbacks, but each step forward is meaningful. Today, I have been sober for just a little over 3 years. Sobriety, combined with my ongoing yoga practice, has provided the foundation for a life of greater clarity, health, and purpose. My journey isn't over, but I am committed to continuing down this path, embracing the ups and downs, and living a life that's rooted in intention and resilience. Yoga teacher training was great because it taught me about all sorts of things that are really valuable to know as a person with FASD. So, for example, I learned about the body's nervous system. As complex beings, we consist of numerous interconnected systems working in harmony, much like the components of a computer. If we consider ourselves as such, the nervous system serves as the motherboard, the core that connects all of our operating systems or all of our body systems. These systems manage essential functions such as breathing, heart rate, muscle movement, skeletal support, immune response, fluid regulation, and reproduction. All of your systems are intimately linked to the nervous system, which acts as the communication hub between the brain and the body. It translates the sensory information that we gather in our environment, so what we see, hear, feel, taste, and even the perception of our safety. And it prompts the body to respond accordingly. So our bodies possess an incredible intelligence, constantly processing both our current experiences as well as our past experiences. So for example, if you had a frightening experience with a dog, your nervous system might generalize that fear to all dogs, even dogs that pose no threat. This means that your body could react to a harmless, leashed dog in the same way as if it were dangerous, like the situation that you had encountered before. This fear response is often is explained through the polyvagal theory. That's what it's called, the polyvagal theory, which suggests that we have a built-in reaction to perceived threats. So most of you are probably familiar with the fight or flight response. There's actually a couple more F's in there. So there's fight, flight, fawn, freeze, and fatigue. So as someone with FASD, it was really important for me to learn about the polyvagal theory. This theory emphasizes the role of the vagus nerve, which runs down through the middle of your forehead, in governing how we respond to fear, connect with others socially, and how we regulate our emotions. When this part of the nervous system is activated, it's commonly referred to as what you would hear, the fight or flight response. So the way that we perceive trauma, not even the way that we experience it, but the way that we perceive is literally changing us at a physiological level. I experienced this firsthand when trauma dominated my life. I lacked a compassionate and supportive inner foundation. My nervous system constantly signaled that danger was everywhere. Cars seemed too fast, music was too loud, lights were too bright, leaving me constantly overwhelmed. As a result, I was jumpy, I had trouble sleeping, and I lived in a state of persistent stress. However, mindfulness and sobriety were pivotal in helping me reframe my world and teach my body not to fear every small trigger. While I still find the world too loud and too bright sometimes, I no longer interpret those sensations as danger, which allows my nervous system to feel safe. And of course, there are still challenging days, but this is the essence of resilience. This process reminds me of a quote by Andrea Gibson, and she writes, "It's time to detach from the suffering if your pain about the pain is worse than the original pain." Good one. This sentiment encapsulates the journey of healing. So understanding how the nervous system operates has been transformative in changing my inner dialogue. Where I once thought things like, "Why are you like this?" I now may say something like, "Maybe this isn't your fault, Shannon." And then eventually, "Okay, Shannon, your nervous system is triggered right now. It's time to step away from electronics, maybe go for a walk, maybe do some yoga or relax in your sensory swing." And that has allowed me to extend more compassion toward myself and approach challenges with greater empathy. By the way, this is what the body's nervous system looks like. So every little tendril that you see is a line of constant communication. This is why the nervous system is so important. By learning about the nervous system, I also learned about something called interoception, which has been very helpful with an FASD brain. Interoception allows us to understand our physiological needs and emotions. It's a collection of senses that provides information to us about our internal state. So not senses as in touch, taste, sound, smell, and sight, but internal senses like being able to sense your own heartbeat, having awareness of your breathing patterns, detecting hunger or fullness, or perceiving pain and discomfort, monitoring hormonal changes in the body as well. So misinterpreting these internal cues can lead to more mental health challenges like anxiety and eating disorders and depression. Being able to tune into these cues allows us to maintain, body balance in the body, therefore maintaining our overall well-being. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the importance of rest. How many of us truly allow ourselves to rest when we need it? Yeah. Rest has been a crucial factor in supporting both my sobriety and my resilience. It plays an essential role in our overall well-being, benefiting not only mental health, but also our concentration, memory, productivity, and our physical health. Without adequate rest, our immune systems will struggle to fend off illnesses or heal from injuries, and it becomes much harder to manage conditions like anxiety and depression. In the realm of addiction and mental health, there's an acronym called HALT. It stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. It's a tool to assess underlying needs when experiencing cravings. For me, it's almost always tired. I constantly find myself needing more rest. Despite having lived in this world for 35 years, I still haven't fully adjusted to how much rest I need. It is wild. The challenge is that we live in a society that does not prioritize rest. Did you know that before the invention of electricity, people worked according to the natural rhythms of the sun, resting when it's set and then working during the day? We used to move through the seasons in alignment with nature, resting more in the fall and winter months and increasing productivity in the spring and the summer. However, with the advent of electricity, this natural cycle was disrupted and longer workdays became the norm. The industrial revolution also contributed to the disappearance of what was once a common practice called a second sleep. People would take naps during the day, a practice that's still embraced by some cultures today, like in Italy and in Spain, but not here. So we live in a society where productivity is equated with personal worth. In this fast-paced environment, it can be difficult to carve out time for rest. Personally, I've had to learn to build breaks into my day, even after completing small tasks, to sit down and reset. It can be frustrating, especially when you're faced with a long list of to-do things. But I've realized that taking these moments to pause is essential, because rest isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And learning to prioritize it has been a key part of sustaining my well-being and growth. I recently listened to a fascinating podcast called We Can Do Hard Things by a woman named Glennon Doyle. And the episode was titled Laziness Does Not Exist. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So it featured Dr. Devin Price, who discusses the key ideas from his latest book of the same name. The episode was eye-opening for me, as I've often labeled myself as lazy. But I'm not lazy. I simply struggle to keep pace with the relentless demands of the neuronormative productivity. Much of my energy is spent just trying to survive, which is something that many people with many different neurotypes or experiences can likely relate to. Dr. Price highlights 3 key tenets that form the foundation of his book, and they struck a chord with me. These tenets are: your worth is measured by your productivity. Not true. You cannot trust your own feelings or limits. Not true. There is always more that you could be doing. Not true. So these are the 3 lies that his book is based on. So how many of us resonate with these ideas? How often do we find ourselves trapped in this cycle of productivity with no room for rest? We live in a world that constantly pushes us to do more, yet we must learn to listen to our bodies when they signal the need for rest. Slowing down is not a sign of failure. In fact, sometimes rest is the most productive thing that we can offer ourselves. When we label someone as lazy, we might be misunderstanding their situation. What might appear as laziness could be a reflection of different values, or it might stem from not giving ourselves enough credit for dealing with trauma, stress, or exhaustion. The next time you find yourself thinking that someone, or even yourself, as lazy, take a moment to shift your perspective. Ask yourself, why do I feel like rest is not a priority? It's not just essential, it's necessary as a part of maintaining balance, well-being, and resilience. So I'd like to take a second to share some of my experience around receiving a diagnosis. So for many years, I found myself asking the question, what is wrong with me? A question that has significantly impacted my sense of self. So deep down, I knew something wasn't quite right, and I was determined to understand it. I've been seeing counselors and therapists since I've been 12 years old. That is 21 years of navigating misdiagnoses, differing opinions, and various medications. For 21 years, I heard phrases like, it's all in your head, or you just need to try harder. During this time, I also took it upon myself to research different conditions, trying to piece together who I was. After 2 decades of searching, I finally received a diagnosis, FASD. I am incredibly fortunate that my stepmother, who worked with high needs children in the school system, recognized something familiar in my behavior that she had seen in her students. She observed me navigating through a series of misdiagnoses and saw how hard I was working on my mental health, yet noticed that conventional interventions weren't yielding the expected results. This is a common experience for individuals with FASD. So thanks to her insight, I was finally able to get the attention and diagnosis that I needed. The reason I want to share my diagnosis is because it didn't just change my life, it transformed my entire family dynamic. My diagnosis provided a new lens through which we could understand my symptoms. We were able to have open conversations about FASD and how it affects my brain, which fostered a deep understanding of how to interact with one another in a more positive and supportive way. This was a pivotal moment in my personal resilience, as it gave me not only a framework and language to better understand myself, but it also opened the door for healing within my family. Before the diagnosis, there was a lot of misunderstanding between us, leading to frustration and often to self-blame on my part. My family didn't fully understand me, and frankly, I didn't understand myself. So one example of this is confabulation, a common trait among people with FASD. Confabulation is defined as fabricating imaginary experiences to compensate for memory loss. In my case, this often meant that I would unknowingly fill in the gaps where my memory was blank, and those fabrications would become part of what I believed to be the actual memory. This led to confusion, as well as others would recall events differently, and I was often accused of lying. It was perplexing for me because I often remembered these events as if they had genuinely happened. Now, with the knowledge that poor memory and confabulation are a part of my diagnosis, my family and I can better address and navigate these situations when they arise. FASD has not only illuminated the challenges that I face, but it has also highlighted my strengths. I am musical and artistic and social. And with this diagnosis, I've come to understand myself more deeply. It has provided my family and me with a clearer understanding of who I am, allowing us to move forward with greater empathy and unity. This diagnosis has given me the tools to rebuild my sense of self and foster stronger relationships, showing that resilience often comes from understanding and acceptance. The positive shift within my family wasn't solely due to my diagnosis. It required a collective effort from each one of us. We all made a conscious effort to work on our behavior. Every member of the family engaged in therapy, both individually and together. I cannot stress how important this is. I'm going off script here. The blame and the opportunity to fix things so often gets put on the person with FASD. And we so need our parents to be going to therapy as well, to be working on their own things so that they can come back and help us through our things. So my parents even sought support from groups specifically designed for parents of children with FASD to better understand how they could support me. This collective effort was crucial, as FASD is a whole family diagnosis, not just for the individual. It is essential for families to actively participate in the healing process to foster understanding and create a supportive environment. From my experience, having a therapist that you connect with is invaluable. Having the opportunity to work through personal challenges in a therapeutic setting greatly improves your ability to navigate relationships, whether with family, clients, or loved ones. Therapy provided us with the tools to strengthen our connections and address difficulties in a constructive way. In addition to therapy, my family made a significant lifestyle change by making our home an alcohol-free space. There was no alcohol in the fridge at family gatherings or during holidays like Christmas or New Year's. This was incredibly helpful for me, as it provided a sense of solidarity in my sobriety and reinforced the support that I was receiving. Even my father has switched to drinking non-alcoholic beer, which was a meaningful gesture that further demonstrated their commitment to my well-being. I love enjoying a non-alcoholic beer with my dad now on a hot, sunny day. This level of family involvement has been a critical component in my journey, offering both emotional and practical support as I continue to prioritize my health and my sobriety. So let's talk about privilege for a little bit as we head towards the end of my presentation here. And I'd like to revisit a quote that I shared earlier on resilience by Jean Chatsky. So she writes, emotional resilience is not a single skill. It's a variety of skills and coping mechanisms. It's the ability to bounce back from a stressful encounter and not let it affect our internal motivation. It's not a bend but don't break situation. Rather, resilience is about accepting brokenness and continuing to grow while putting the pieces back together. This quote resonates deeply with my personal journey. I've shared parts of my story, highlighting the skills and the coping mechanisms I've developed for emotional resilience. I've used mindfulness, engaged in therapy, worked on my inner dialogue, embraced yoga, and learned about the nervous system and the importance of rest. However, there's an essential aspect of my story that I haven't addressed, and that is privilege. While I've worked hard to develop these tools, the truth is that I wouldn't be here today without the support of my parents. It's their privilege that has been instrumental in my ability to move forward. They have enabled me to rise out of poverty. I am on ODSP and still living at the poverty line, but I am no longer living below the poverty line, and that has been a huge difference in my life. So by moving in with them, I was significantly able to improve my social determinants of health. This support system has been a critical part of my journey, and it's important to acknowledge that resilience is often built not only through individual effort, but also through the opportunities and resources afforded to us by others. So you can see the social determinants of health on this slide here. These are shaped by policy decisions and the distribution of wealth, power, and resources at global, national, and local levels. They encompass the conditions in which people are born, grow, work, live, and age, as well as the systems that influence our daily lives. As a result of these improved circumstances in my life, I now have better access to healthcare services. I have the ability to make healthier lifestyle choices, and I have improved housing quality, and I have the opportunity to further my education. I want to acknowledge that this discussion about privilege and social determinants of health can be kind of uncomfortable, and that's okay. This isn't meant to evoke guilt, and it's not our fault if some of our opportunities were inherited. However, it's important to recognize that the struggles marginalized populations face are often shaped by these inequities. This discussion doesn't diminish the real life challenges that we are all facing or the privileges that we may lack in other areas of life. For example, I am white and I speak English, which are privileges, but I am also queer, I don't own property, and I have a disability. So privilege, like many other things, exists on a spectrum. Personally, my understanding of privilege deepened when I encountered the wheel of privilege, which you can see on this slide here. So the closer we are to the center of the wheel, the more privilege and power that we hold, the fewer barriers that we encounter. Take a moment to locate yourself on the wheel if you can. I'll read the outside here. So the slices on the wheel of privilege are citizenship, skin color, formal education, ability, sexuality, neurodiversity, mental health, body size, housing, wealth, language, and gender. So the closer you are to the outside line, you are in a more marginalized position. And the closer you are to the center, the more power or privilege that you have. The health inequities that we see are often avoidable and profoundly unjust. Understanding privilege and the social determinants of health is crucial in shaping a more equitable future. In 2022, 27% of Canadians aged 15 or older, equating to 8 million Canadians, reported having at least one disability. Resilience is often more than work harder. It's about rest, meeting basic needs, and building capacity from a place of stability. If you have the ability, I encourage you to contact your local member of provincial parliament, your MPP, from which you can easily find through a quick search And then you can advocate for basic income for all, better disability support packages, and an increase in the federal disability benefit, which was just recently announced at a mere $200 a month. As Brene Brown wisely said, what separates privilege from entitlement is gratitude. You can be grateful for what you have without feeling entitled to it. Gratitude is an essential part of this journey. By practicing gratitude, we focus on the abundance in our lives, reinforcing a sense of appreciation for the opportunities and resources that we do have. So I stand here before you today, not just as the person that you see, but as the sum of countless versions of myself that have lived and evolved over the last 35 years. I am the girl who struggles with an eating disorder, the addict, the sex worker. I am the girl who stole, the girl who lied, the one who aches with pain that seems unrelenting. I am the one who battles anxiety and endured depression so deep that I thought the darkness would never lift. Each of these identities, each of these experiences live within me because, as they say, the body keeps a score. These parts of me have shaped my physical biology, impacted my nervous system, and colored my mental health, influencing how I perceive and interact with this world. It is fetal alcohol spectrum disorder that ties these experiences together, providing a comprehensive explanation for many facets of my journey. This diagnosis is not just a personal revelation, but a societal one. It's critical for me to be here today to help humanize and challenge the long-standing stigma around this condition. In one of his speeches, Dr. Gabor Mate references a Lakota man who says that when someone in their community falls ill, the community responds with, "Thank you. Your illness reflects the dysfunction in our community." This profound statement speaks to the interconnectedness of individual and societal well-being. I am here to tell you that we as a society are unwell. This illness is not just isolated within our minds, but extends to our physical bodies, our emotional well-being, our spiritual health, and our mental states. FASD and the challenges it brings reflects a broader dysfunction that affects all of us. This lifelong disorder continues to grow and has become an epidemic of its own making. It's a collective issue, and we must begin to address the systemic dysfunction that it fuels. As long as alcohol remains a dominant force in our culture, we will continue to need resilience skills to cope with the consequences. Alcohol plays a central role in this issue, and until we confront it as a society, the kind of resilience that I have had to build will remain a necessity. However, if we take meaningful steps to change, the resilience I've developed may no longer be as crucial for future generations. They may not have to carry the same burdens or navigate the same hardships. As I mentioned at the start, standing here today represents a tremendous amount of behind-the-scenes work. Resilience is a skill I've been fortunate enough to develop, and it has allowed me to not only survive, but thrive. It is something I carry with a sense of both pride and weight. Resilience has been my lifelines, but at times it also feels like a heavy burden. Proof of the struggle, and also a reminder of how far I've come. The best things in life often come with that duality. They are both a source of strength and a reminder of the battles that we face. They are bittersweet and often more than one thing at a time. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story with you today. It is my hope that by understanding and addressing these systemic challenges, we can create a more compassionate and supportive society for all. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, how many people out there are crying right now? That's what I want to know. So first of all, Shannon, when I was listening to your presentation, the first thing that came to mind is, oh my goodness, there's about 10 presentations and all of this.
I feel like it can be broken down.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think I think this is where we're so excited to be able to share with everybody. This is not the first time we're going to be here.
Mhm.
And in fact, you're going to be here every single month for the next 8 meetings. And we are absolutely looking forward to you being able to kind of flesh this out even more, being able to work with our individuals who are living with this disability, being able to help them kind of hopefully come to the same level of self-realization that you have. The other piece, though, that also stood out for me is you've certainly given all of us a lot of things to reflect on. And I think the biggest one that every single person in this room would certainly agree with is, yes, change is needed in our society.
Mhm.
There needs to be greater awareness. There needs to be more education and training. And when we think through the rural FASD logic model, we know that when we have awareness and understanding and education and training, fellowship is then created and relationships built. And that's what we all do.
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank
Can I
you.
do this?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. To our audience out there, we thank you once again for joining us here today. We look forward to seeing you next month as we are anticipating Inspector Curly Todris of the OPP Perth Detachment is going to be joining us to share a little bit about some of the community supports that they do here in Lanark County, as well as how different ways that we can keep ourselves safe and how the police are able to our police force are able to support us in those methods. So once again, we thank everyone for joining us, and we will see you next month.